Transition assistance is just following congressional mandates. Hey, I am Chuck the Bureaucrat, and today I just want to highlight a couple of things about the Transition Assistance Program that, if you understand them, it can help make your transition that much more successful. And that is that the Transition Assistance Program and the contents that it provides, they're mandated by Congress under Title 10, Chapter 58 of U.S. Code. Why does that matter? Well, you can trust the Department of Defense to give you exactly what Congress tells them to give you, but maybe not much more. And as a natural consequence of that, there are going to be gaps, and there's a chance that you might fall through one of those gaps. The first thing I'm going to touch on is this requirement for pre-separation counseling. It's in Section 1142 of Title 10. There's three things that your service secretary has to do. They have to provide for individual counseling of each member. And notice it doesn't say that they have to counsel each individual member. They have to make it available, and if you don't take advantage of it, too bad, so sad. The point here is that while counseling is available, you are responsible for taking actions that actually get you a good transition, not the least of which is actually getting yourself to the counseling. Number two, you are entitled to this information regardless of the reason that you're being discharged. I have seen certain kinds of leaders who seem to take a sadistic glee in interfering with the transition of a service member because they feel that the service member doesn't deserve that information. That kind of behavior is just unjustified. And then the final thing about this requirement for separation counseling is that a document signed by you gets placed in your military record stating that you received this counseling. To me, this makes it all seem like the biggest CYA drill that you have ever seen. And what's particularly galling about this is that the service is empowered to say, oh, we told him about it, and he said he understood. How were we to know that he didn't understand what we had told him? Anyways, there is a list of something like 19 items that the Transition Assistance Program is supposed to cover. These are all down in subparagraph B of Section 1142, and what I've done here today is reorganize them in an effort to make them, make more sense. But I have left the subparagraph numbers here in case you want to track them down yourself. Now, before we get too far, I just want to point out that you'll notice there is a strong flavor in these items of what I call get a job. There's a focus on employment that seems to assume that if a veteran has a job, then everything else about the transition, it's going to go smoothly. I'm not going to say that employment isn't important, but it doesn't solve all problems, and it can become sort of a complicated mess in and of itself. Okay, just in general, there are three elements of interest: creation of a transition plan, inclusion of your spouse, particularly when it comes to job placement, and veterans' preference in job placement and training. See what I mean about get a job? Two important points here. You see that mention of creating a transition plan? Can't nobody do that for you. People like transition assistants or even me, we can help you. We can put the tools in your hands. But you have to create, manage, and most importantly, execute that plan yourself. Second, notice where it says financial objectives. I'll show you in more detail later, but there is a limit to how much actual financial advice the TAP folks can give you. And without a good understanding of your personal financial objectives, it's difficult to know how to use the information that TAP provides. All right, so now we're going to tick through education, employment, healthcare, finances, and some odds and ends. For education, they are going to talk a lot, but they aren't really going to do anything. Montgomery GI Bill, 9/11 GI Bill, vocational rehab, they all have a lot of paperwork. And while you have to build all of that bureaucratic red tape into your transition plan, TAP will at best describe it. What's more, if you're going the education route, there is a massive, complex, time-phased set of tasks that you have to organize to get through that process. Application deadlines, start dates, movement to school, transfer of credits. When I'm advising somebody who is headed down the education track, there is inevitably a custom timeline that, I'll be honest, a lot of people start too late. Of course, when it comes to employment, lots and lots of time gets spent here by TAP, so I'm not going to take too much time today. Instead, I want to move on to finances. First, I'd say that the financial planning assistance provided by TAP is weak, but for a reason. They, like me, are not licensed financial advisors. They are not your CPA. They're not your tax preparer, your bookkeeper. They're not your insurance agent, and they certainly aren't your estate attorney. So the financial planning assistance actually boils down to some very basic financial literacy. And to be honest, if you've never gotten any financial literacy training, then TAP is as good a place as any to start. But consider this. Most retirees have multi-million-dollar assets. I mean, when you start adding in the pension and the annuities and the VA, there's a gap here in financial assistance, and it's one that you are going to have to fill for yourself. So I always recommend people try to find a professional financial advisor as soon as possible, even years in advance of their separation. The other thing I'll say has to do with the retiree account statement, sort of the retired version of the LES. It's going to be really, really important for your finances, but it might not get the emphasis that it's due. Next, you got healthcare. Medical, dental, VA. When you're going through the final months of your active duty time, these might not seem very important, but they're going to mean a lot as soon as you're out. And there are some fairly narrow windows for enrolling in these programs, so you have to make very sure that you build this into your transition plan. And then, in the middle of all these healthcare issues to be covered, are two somewhat ominous references to suicide. I'd like to say that this doesn't belong or that it's just more CYA for the brass, but the fact of the matter is that your military transition is a major life change. So let me compromise and say this. TAP is going to introduce you to the formal services that are available, but no matter who you are and what you're going through, I guarantee you that there are people out there who are interested in providing people just like you the help you need. They want you to win, they want you to overcome, so reach out to them. And if you don't know anybody, just send me a note. And now we're going to wrap up with a mishmash of little things that get tossed into the TAP stew. They'll talk about reserve affiliation, and for some transitioning folks, you're going to be destined for the RC without realizing it. You got relocation and home loans, small business help, and assistance programs for caregivers to eligible vets. At the end of the day, the Transition Assistance Program is a fire hose of information where about half of the information doesn't necessarily apply to any individual service member. And the parts that do matter, well, there's no guarantee that all of the actions necessary get fully addressed. If you are interested in helping engineer this process so that people can get through more successfully and maybe just being a guinea pig yourself, well, watch this video and shoot me a note.